Hello everyone, Jay here from the Training Court podcast, the Pokemon TCG podcast about anything and everything Pokemon TCG related. We just wanted to let you, our listeners, know that we are doing a stream of Paldea Evolved pre-release on Saturday the 27th of May at 8:30 BST, exclusively live over on our YouTube channel. The link will be in the description below, and make sure you all like, subscribe and have all notification settings checked on to not miss this event. We'll be opening packs and kits ahead of release, building decks and battling them all live. Make sure you don't miss it. Now, let's get on with the episode. Hello everyone and welcome to the Training Court, a Pokemon TCG podcast about anything and everything Pokemon TCG related. Jay here, and I'm joined by my fellow co-hosts Alex, Andy and Kath. And this week we are joined by another special co-host. This week we are joined by our esteemed guest, Joe from OmniPoke. Hi Joe, and welcome to our podcast, and thank you for coming in.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, always good fun.
Good. So another week, another training for results, and loads of news to discuss. Some more controversy, unfortunately. However, I thought before we dig into the news, we thought probably take the opportunity to speak to, we've got Pokemon TCG royalty here, learn more about you, Joe. So I'm going to kick it off with the most generic question ever, and I do this with every guest: is how did you get into Pokemon? TCG specifically, obviously.
TCG, sure. So. Had the generic playground story of being, 6 or 7 and opening the cards for the first time, trading them with friends. Never really learnt the rules back in the base set era. It wasn't until I was kind of feeling nostalgic to open some packs, and this is in the Diamond and Pearl era now, so jumping forward to around 2008, 2009. And I opened a Legends Awakened pack and I pulled an Uxie Level X. And back then, this was probably one of the most playable Level X cards in the game. Unbeknownst to me, I had no idea what was going on. I just saw silver borders and a holographic that I'd never seen before. Had no idea what was happening. And it was shiny, exactly. So it just led me to research the card, and just essentially Google searching Uxie Level X, because it was the most playable card at the time, led me towards article sites and that sort of thing. And that's how I really got into the rabbit hole of competitive trading card game of Pokemon. And that just spurred something in me, and I really enjoyed that there was this whole world that I'd never really known about Pokemon before. So that's how it started for me.
Yeah, I think we've all spoken about it before. Very similar to myself. I think myself and Alex, we played, again, we're probably showing our age a bit here. We played back in Jungle, I'd say Jungle and Fossil, when that was actually out. So probably 99, 2000, when the packs were.
It sounds like we're really experienced, but there was a long gap from there.
That's it. We stopped. We stopped. And then for myself, kind of it came more towards during lockdown. Going to the supermarkets when during COVID, where you had to go in the one-way systems, everything, and I remember just being queued up, and the queue went all the way back through to the toy section, and there was just this. I mean, I've always played the games. I still play the games to this day, but never touched the trading card game. And I just saw this pack there, and I was like, God, it's been what, 20 odd years since I've opened it. Oh, I'll get one. And I like yourself, went home and I pulled a full art Karina's Focus. And I was like, oh, this is good. Oh, no, this is dangerous. This is dangerous. So then, and that was around Celebrations time. Then Celebrations was the next set revealed, and the nostalgia hit. That was just perfect timing, perfect for the Pokemon company to release it as well. And then it was just down a rabbit hole from then. But it was actually a video, because obviously, the Pokemon craze had exploded massively during COVID. Obviously, collecting is such a big part of the game itself, and obviously exploded in America. But I was trying to find UK based PokeTubers, basically, because I wanted to know where can you get the products. I don't want to go to I'm not going to be able to go to Target and pick up anything. It wasn't as easy as that. And it was actually a video with Randolph and with yourself, actually.
Okay.
That then piqued my interest, and I was like, oh, there's actually, I forgot, of course you can play the game, of course it makes sense, all these numbers and actually mean something. And then I started going down a rabbit hole, and it was around Brilliant Stars time that we started jumping in and playing again, and it's been an expensive ride since. Okay, so I'm going to open the room now for questions. So I'm just going to go to Al. Have you got a question for Joe?
I do have a question, and so my question is, what do you think will be the most influential card from Paldea Evolved that isn't Iono? Because obviously Iono is going to be the most.
Okay, no, I guess I actually have to think. I mean, I think outside of that, it would probably be, I guess Reversal Energy is probably the next most impactful card, the other like combat card of the set. I think it drastically improves Gardevoir, which is already like a top 5 deck, I would say, in the game. It could push it towards top 3, top 2 decks in the game. Because it just makes that Shining Arcana Gardevoir so much more dangerous, so much more powerful. But also the Reversal Energy could be used with the new Luxray card that we're getting in the set to give us some lightning type coverage, which could be quite good into Lugia. And that Reversal Energy could find its way in Lugia decks itself, but also other people could splash it in to sort of finally have a check to Lugia that isn't other 2-prize Pokemon, which I think has been an issue for like Lost Box decks and stuff like that. So I think it's definitely one of my more favored cards of Paldea Evolved, and I think it will be pretty impactful.
Yeah, actually, as a follow-up question, do you think that, because with the Luxray being played in Gardevoir, and Electric in Gardevoir is quite unusual, especially now, but do you think that there's room or space in Gardevoir decks going forward for more like a kind of like a toolbox kind of like Lugia? Lugia just plays whatever it wants. It can just accelerate anything to anything. Do you think there's a place for Pokemon, like even grass Pokemon, to deal with the dark type? Any kind of Pokemon that has a 3, a basic Pokemon. Obviously, Luxray is quite unique because you can just put it on the bench.
Right.
But yeah, like a basic. Do you think that Gardevoir can become? I know it wants to accelerate Psychic to Psychic, but as a tech, maybe putting in grass Pokemon for.
Well, and as a follow-up, can you guess what deck he actually plays, by the way?
Yeah. So I play Lost Box.
Yeah. Okay. Well, there you go. Well, I think if you're a Lost Box gamer, I think the Luminous Energy is a great card for you to make it a toolboxy Lost Box deck. I think for Gardevoir, just the Gardevoirs themselves are so good at attacking, they just stick to themselves, really. So just using the Guardies to draw as many cards as possible and then pop off with those guys seems like probably the best route. Because Reversal Energy is not that easy to splash because it has to be evolved Pokemon, so it takes up more space. But Luminous Energy could be a good one for you as a Lost Box player because, you could play 2 or 3 copies of that, and then suddenly your Tropius, your Galarian Zapdos, your Raikou, they're all stitched together quite nicely, and maybe you could use like Raihan or something, or Gates to sort of fulfill the other energy cost for them.
Yeah.
Cool.
Definitely. Andy?
Mine was similar to Alex's. Is basically with the new sets coming up that we know of, how you think the meta will change going forward.
Sure. Well, I really like the Chien-Pao Baxcalibur deck. I'm a believer.
That's why.
it didn't do amazingly well at the Champions League in Niigata, but I don't think that necessarily matters because it's had widespread success in the like City League results, which makes me think it's going to be very powerful. You can just see immediately why it's potentially strong. You have, as long as you can Candy, you can get turn 2 pressure with Greninja, which already can just punish bad starts from so many decks in the game. As long as they don't develop their Manaphy, that could be massive. Or just forcing people to develop Manaphy to respect your turn 2 plays is huge. You have other single prizes at your disposal. So I think you can play a 1-prize game quite well as Chien-Pao, but then also you have the blow up option of the EX itself, which allows you to race like the Mew players and the Lugia players quite effectively. So I think it naturally is just a deck that comes out of the box straight away and is going to be really, really strong. So I think that's, in terms of new contenders, that's probably the big one to come out from the set. But then I think there's so many cards that just go into a like majority of decks. Like Iono completely changes the game. A lot of you guys who haven't played in an N era will have to completely readjust to this new system, basically, where there are going to be times where passing is better than taking knockouts on certain terms because your board's not ready to take those prizes and go to a 0 or like a low hand size or whatever. So, and then decks themselves, just based on how well you can thin the deck and how well you can draw cards throughout the game, completely change in value based to how good they possibly have been in the past. And things like tempo and stuff that we've seen be really good strategies as of late now becomes far less powerful because you immediately go down to a 4-card hand and you can have mid-game bricks now. So Iono is just very profoundly different of playing a Pokemon trading card game. So that's kind of the biggest one, of course.
Do you see Iono getting more play over such things as Judge? Obviously, Judge has been the big one following Marnie's. Obviously Marnie's moving on to My words have gone. Moving on. That's
Passing.
It's passing. The passing.
Passing the baton on from Marley to Judge, and obviously Roxanne has been a really good late gamer. Do you see that Iono is just going to completely wipe them off, or do you reckon you're going to see a mix? Obviously, Roxanne's great late gamer, but you see it in your opening hand. It's not great. Whereas Iono is great to make sure you can refill that hand at the start of the game.
Yeah, I think Iono honestly overtakes all of them, except maybe Arc plays Judge still, just for that immediate effect. And it's so easy for them to get out of a Judge post Starbirth or post Barrel Squovit or whatever. So I think Iono overtakes everything, just because turn 1 going second or turn 2, you just see 6 cards, and that's massive. That's absolutely a huge amount of cards that you gain. So you just get to play the game so much, and just by having a high count of Iono means you're naturally in good stead to have a disruption card when you need it, when you're in turns 3 or 4. So you naturally want to play like 3 copies of Iono in the majority of decks, just so you have it on the turns you need it.
I think for deck building as well, it makes things so much more interesting, because you could probably just get away with playing 4 Iono and that's it for your disruption.
100%.
Where like in my deck, I play 4 research. This is my Gardevoir deck. I play 4 research, a Judge, and a Roxanne. I could just swap those 6 cards for 4 cards and have 2 cards for something else. Yeah, it opens up a lot, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's a great space cheat, and it's just adding to really good early game consistency. So even though it's hurting people play the game in the late game stages, it helps everyone play the game in general for the first couple of turns, which is amazing. And we don't have those feels bad moments of just a Judge being crummy on like turn 1 or 2.
No, definitely.
It's a much better feeling, I think.
Brilliant. Kath, have you got any questions?
Favorite card of all time.
Oh man, that is rough. Oh my goodness. Okay, if I had to pick one, I think I would pick Diving Draw Empoleon from Dark Explorers. Diving Draw is the same effect as Trade from Zoroark, but it's on an Empoleon, which is my favorite Pokemon. So it combines my love of the trading card game and one of my favorite Pokemon designs themselves. And it did formulate a decent deck in its time, where you could use Dust Noir to manipulate damage counters that you dealt with your Empoleon. So it was quite an interesting tricksy deck where you could try and have multi-prize turns. And actually that was a deck back in the day that took advantage of N quite well, because you could spread the counters all over the board and take multi-prize turns all in one go. So, and it was supported by the draw engine of Empoleon. So that would probably be my answer today, but on any other day it could be a different one.
It's a good question. So obviously you mentioned obviously the fact that we're newer players. We're playing in the Sword and Shield era, now the Scarlet and Violet. You've been playing obviously a lot longer. What's been your favorite generation or era of actually Pokemon play? The way you felt like, because from our side it felt, especially towards the end, obviously the Silver Tempest meta. Lugia everywhere. If you weren't playing Lugia, you were playing something to try and stop Lugia, and it didn't feel great. Every week we played, we were like, you either play something to counter Lugia, you can't play these fun decks anymore. You can, but you get stomped on by Lugia, and it feels bad, man. So, from kind of towards the end of Sword and Shield era, it felt a bit stale, and obviously Scarlet and Violet were still got the end of that, because obviously until they completely get rid of these. But what's been in your opinion, your favorite era, and where it's most flexible and the meta has been? You could choose 4 decks, and I know you can do it now, but 4 or 5 decks, but they're actually all competitive.
Yeah, all really good combination of questions there, really. I'm someone that's basically always found at least a deck to enjoy in pretty much every format that I've played in. So I don't really think that I've felt too bored or too anti many formats. I think you're right in saying that having less than like 4 or so viable decks makes it a bit of a dodge and weave and a bit of a carousel of matchups when you go to bigger tournaments, which can be a frustration. But I've found decks that I've liked in pretty much every format. There's been times where I've resorted to weird decks like Xerneas Break and stuff when I didn't like the consistency of any deck in the format. And those are kind of like the darker periods, I suppose. But I've pretty much found ways to enjoy the TCG throughout. If I had to hark back to great eras to look back on, I really like the Diamond and Pearl era that I actually started. And I think there's part of that learning so much and becoming more of an established player at that point where everything looks more exciting and intricate because I'm learning these combinations for the first time. But there are definitely decks like Gyarados that stand out from Stormfront as one of my favorite decks back then. I like playing SP decks as well. Just a lot of options with those archetypes, which I think are really cool. But you could pretty much drop me into any time period in the Pokemon TCG, and I'll find a deck that I like and try and learn the intricacies of those decks.
Do you think that the eras have got better? Because obviously, as Jay said, we only really know Sword and Shield and obviously Scarlet and Violet, so we can't really compare. Has it improved or has it gone down?
I mean, Scarlet and Violet looks like it's a massive improvement on early Sword and Shield.
Mm-hmm.
And I think late Sun and Moon also had a lot of criticism around it. I think basically 3 prize Pokemon in whatever iteration were probably on the side of a mistake and probably too fast. I completely understand. Yeah, I mean, it's obvious to just point and blame them, but VMAXs were all very boring in that they all did the same thing turn 1 and 2. They were just different types of cards, and they all, all successful ones had like 2 energy attacks, and they all did the same thing, basically. Just different ways of dealing a huge amount of damage, and all had the most amount of hit points. So you can see why they were very samey, and I think that's probably, if I had to point at any like dark time in the TCG, it would be around that era. But I think every format creates its own challenges and gives you a reason to be creative and finding those counter decks and finding those innovations, even on the best decks. You know, sometimes it's a tweak of 2 or 3 cards that pushes the best deck to being more well-rounded or better in the mirror, which then makes it like the new best way to play the deck. So I'm actually a massive fan of just the small intricacies of pushing the actual 60 cards that you're taking to a tournament to the absolute maximum. That's what really excites me, I think, as a deck builder.
No, definitely. You obviously mentioned that, you know, VMAXs do the same thing. We obviously, we're now in, obviously, we've gone to an era where stage 2 Pokemon, you know, rare candies, you know, the evolution Pokemon, the long game, you know, is coming out. And then obviously at Worlds, they did say, when they announced Scarlet and Violet, they said it's the, you know, the time of the comeback, and obviously Iono helps that massively. Terrestrialization, though, that's, we all thought, obviously, when we saw the game, we played the game, we all thought this is going to be fantastic, it's going to be so cool in the TCG, and so far it's really failed to live up to expectations. Do you, in the past, obviously, you know, we haven't got the experience, but do you think that they're going to alter it and amend it to, you know, we know there's a Dark Charizard coming out, so we know they're going to mess with the types a little bit. Do you think terrestrialization is terrestrialization? Do you reckon that's actually going to be a good gimmick eventually, or do you reckon it's just going to fall flat and it's just going to be the power of the decks?
I mean, it's such a waste of what could be such interesting card text. I imagine that after Worlds, they will, or like during the Worlds opening ceremony, they will announce terrestrial mechanic as being different types, and I think that gets really interesting. I think having one archetype that can naturally inherently be multi-type and actually like function together, or have a type of Pokemon that uses different type of energy to attack, can create some really interesting deck building, right? So I think has to be the direction that they go to, otherwise it's a massive missed opportunity for them.
No, definitely.
I wondered if they were going to have like some kind of tool card that, if it's a terrestrial, like if it's a Gyarados, he terrestrializes into water, but then the tool card that you can attach that can change the type.
I can definitely see that being a thing. I can definitely see that being a good restriction on it.
And that's what's exciting for us as new players, isn't it? I suppose we don't know what's coming, you know. But I'm hoping that it's going to be something. So
they kind of did that at the tail end of Sword and Shield with the V-Star tools, with the seal stones, and putting a V-Star on as a tool. So I can see them doing it, like a terrestrial. That would be, I didn't actually think of that before you said it, but that would be the natural way of doing terrestrialization in the TCG as a tool.
Especially because they've obviously split items and tools now, so that makes sense. So
Arvin suddenly being very good.
Exactly. Last question from my side. You've got, like I said, you've got a long history in the Pokemon TCG as a player. As of late, we've been seeing you a lot more on the presenting side. Obviously, I saw you in World, we saw you at EUIC. Do you miss the playing? Are you obviously? I know you looked at going to Malmo, but you're unfortunately unable to go. What do you prefer? Do you prefer presenting, or do you prefer actually playing the game? Because I know you play it, obviously.
I play all the time. I'm playing every day, right? So even if I'm not at tournaments at the highest level, I still love playing. I intended to go to every international championships this season before I heard that it was in Japan. So then I had to focus all my money and days on holiday into Japan itself. So I think next season I'll try to go to every IC, be it commentating or playing. I'll basically never say no to commentary because it's just an amazing experience. And I actually put a lot of pressure on myself as a player that's been around for a long time, and I suppose high profile in some capacity, that I do put a lot of pressure on myself before tournaments as a player, and I really try very hard, put a lot of hours into the game to try and get the best results. So I think sometimes you have those nerves, but if things go well, I think there's no better feeling, of doing well at a tournament for me. So you can get like days that are absolute 10 out of 10s. You can get days where you feel terrible, whereas commentary is like a solid 8 out of 10 throughout the entire weekend. You're there the entire weekend as well, which is guaranteed.
Guaranteed day 2.
Which you can't say for many other tournaments.
Exactly. Yeah. But it obviously shows from my side, watching you as a commentator, the passion for the game, the knowledge as well, and and also the relationship you have with other casters. My personal favorite of your pairings is yourself and Ross, which was obviously during Worlds. Love Ross, I think he's great, and obviously watch his videos, and I just thought you two had a really, really good rapport. But then I also during the UIC saw a bit of yourself and Boo as well, and again that worked really well as well. So
I'm glad.
Yeah, no, definitely. So it must be fantastic to obviously, we, like I said, I've numerous times in this podcast, we come together every week just to chat Pokemon TCG because this is what we love. So to do that on a professional level with you, obviously, and to do it on such a high level must be pretty good.
I was just gonna say how did you get that gig? Are they looking for other people?
Right place, right time, I think, in my case.
Did you have to audition or?
I had to interview for it, yeah.
How was the process?
Intimidating. It was on a Skype call, but I was in a suit and tie, and I think it was like a couple hour interviews, so it was quite in detail with a number of TCI staff.
It is.
Higher ups.
Yeah, a couple of people that I already knew, like judges in the scene and stuff back then in like when was this? 2016, I think it was.
Yeah. Miyamoto pops in as well and says hey.
Not quite that way.
Oh, brilliant. No, well, thank you for that. Guys, have you got any other questions before we move on to the results we've had 2 regionals, so we've got some results to talk about. You guys got any more?
No.
We could probably go on all day, but we could
probably go on.
I was going to say that is the thing. We'll probably carry on after, but we don't want to hold Joe up for too long. So thanks for that, Joe. And then obviously moving on, then we, as mentioned beforehand, we had 2 regionals this weekend. So we had the regional in Malmo in Sweden, then we obviously had the regional over in Hartford in America. We will discuss Hartford first. Quite a big tournament again. These regionals just seem to be getting bigger and bigger. When I spoke to Paul Stringer, who I played in day 1 of Liverpool, he said his regionals used to be 30 to 50 people. Liverpool itself was just shy of 725. Hartford itself had just over 1,050 players, as of which Rowan Stavenau won with a deck which was no one saw coming. So this is actually the deck that Kath took to EUIC, didn't you? Mm-hmm. So the Fusion Strike Mew deck won a regional, which it feels weird saying that, really.
Didn't it win Malmo as well? Was it Fusion or was it DT?
It won Malmo as well.
It was.
It went from
just the Deoxys.
Bizarre. I was pretty taken back by that, to be honest. But obviously I'll share Rowan's list now on screen. Joe, you're obviously the professional. From your side, this must have taken you a bit out of left field. And obviously the list itself is playing some interesting cards that you wouldn't usually see. What do you think overall?
Well, I think one of the smartest things really was the timing of choosing to play Meloetta, because going into this weekend, there was a lot of hype around Arceus, right? It had just done well at the previous regionals.
Yeah.
And the combination of Arceus and Lugia being two archetypes now that can really crumble under really early pressure. And also, we just said how surprised we were that Meloetta had just done well. So I think most people, when they come up against Mew, wouldn't expect turn 1 pressure going second. They think they would have a turn to just like bench their stuff, attach. Sure, maybe their hand gets disrupted, but they're probably not getting hit because they're expecting DTE Mew, because we haven't seen Fusion for a long time really at top table play, right? So almost everyone would have assumed it was DTE that they were up against. So if you just bench one Arceus, if you just bench one Lugia, and your opponent gets the Sparkle combo, you're in a lot of trouble.
Yeah,
and this is a speedy list, right? It's made the space for shoes, so and triple Forest Seal Stone, so it makes its combo happen pretty reliably, I'd say.
Yeah, and it's obviously good. You know, we saw that Arcdura is obviously
Another
quite
one,
prominent as well. You know, you're able to, it's in a way of getting around that, because people are now teching for things. You know, obviously Mawile was the worst kept secret in the UIC. Everyone was going to run it, and then I didn't come across it at all, luckily. And then obviously, you know, Arcdura and Duraludon in the Lugia mirror as well. You know, that's been there. So the tech in there is pretty impressive. So yeah, I mean, it took us all by surprise. Did not expect it. But you know, congratulations to Rowan. Played really well. I watched a couple of his games on stream. Did really well. Obviously, you know, when you go to a final, you've got a winner, you've got a loser. So unfortunately, in second place was Grant Shen. He played obviously a Lugia deck, but I'm pretty sure he played single strike Lugia. We're just going to get the list up now. So he played single strike Lugia. Again, I like this deck. I'm a Lugia stan, even though it bricks for me just so badly. I still love Lugia. Lugia's my favorite Pokemon. And yeah, when Lugia came out on Silver Tempest, I said straight away, I'm playing this deck. I've been told to stop playing it now by a lot of people. I've been told
me included.
in our last before the Challenge Cup and before UIC, I played in our locals, and one of the competitors there, Matt Byram, he just turned to me and said, just stop, just put Lugia down, because it just
then
honestly
pops up there. It's always there. It's always there in the top 8.
Other people, but yeah, not for me. It's obviously a skill issue. But yeah, obviously the list there, you know, single strike, you know, it's becoming quite commonplace now. You know, the Urshifu can be swapped out for the Durala, the 1/1 Duraludon. The Yveltal there is a really good one prizer. The Stone Jern is missing, which I was quite surprised at. But the Serena, I really like the Serena. The Penny as well. I think the Penny has become a bit of a common theme now in Lugia decks. The ability to, you know, pick up your Lugia or any Pokemon that's been, you know, lost mind or Moonlight Shuriken. Or for me, I've used it before where you pick it up at a Radiant Serena, you're able to double heal. Again, you're able to get out of that range. But it's Lugia's there, you know, it's still there. It's not going away anytime soon. Like Joe said, I actually think that it's going to get more powerful. We've seen, I think, the Snorlax, the unfaced fat Snorlax benefits from therapy energy. Yeah. Lugia's just going to tech, isn't it?
Next rotation, are we losing battle style stuff?
Yeah, we should be.
Yeah.
So but
they'll just find something else.
Lugia will find something else. Yeah, exactly. So looking at the rest of the top 8, you know, we've got a bit of a mishmash of decks. Again, we've got a couple more Lugias. Reagan, Retzloff, again, another top 4 finish. I think he was in the final in the last regional he was at. He's a really good up and coming Lugia player as well. So I follow him quite closely. But yeah, we've got another
as well. Reagan, isn't he?
He is, yeah. I think he did really well in juniors, didn't he? And he's moved up to masters, and he's just consistency now. You know, you talk about, you know, always the bridesmaid, never the bride, but the consistency of being able to get into those top 4s for these such large events.
I mean, it's getting top 8 is like,
it's an amazing achievement.
Top 32 is pretty good as well, to be fair. Just making day 2 I'd be happy
top
with.
256.
I'd take top 500 actually. They're at my point.
I mean, I was buzzing with my top 1200 and something odd. UIC.
Yeah. But we jumped out of EUIC. We unfortunately folded because we wanted to go to the Pokemon Center. So that's the only way to get to the Pokemon Center. But yeah, Lost Box is still there, still going. Obviously many variations of it. Let me just have a quick look at Daniel's list. Pretty sure this one is the this is the Kyogre, the Kyogre build, which is seeing some, a lot of play. That's not going to go away, and I think that Baxcalibur will only benefit. Kyogre will only benefit from something like Baxcalibur and Paldea Evolved. Just to snipe the bench is just incredible, I think. So it's interesting to see Lost Box is still going to be there. Do you think, Joe, that Iono is going to? Everyone's saying that Iono is going to kill Lost Box. I don't think that's the case, but it's going to. It's going to massively impact it. What in your opinion? How actually impactful is that going to be on decks such as Lost Box?
I think it just changes the builds, I suppose. I think the sort of turbo Forest Seal Stone ones that aren't playing Kyogre are probably a bit riskier now, because you go crazy for a turn, get that early Mirage Gate, take a 2-price knockout. But the whole point of Lost Box is that you're replenishing attackers turn by turn, and Iono can really put a spanner in the works for that approach. But if you play Kyogre, you're naturally playing around Iono quite well, right? So it's almost a better outcome for you that there's more Iono than there are Judge now. So I think it just makes probably Charizard builds strong because they need so little in the late game to recover from an Iono, or Kyogre builds stronger because they naturally try and take a chunk of prizes at the end of the game, right? So they both play around Iono quite well. I think it basically just hurts Sky Seal Stone builds and Turbo builds more than anything else. But Lost Zone is certainly still very good next set.
Yeah, they'll find a way. It's just they'll definitely find a way. Another deck that is seeing a bit more play is the Arc Duraludon, but also paired with Umbreon V and VMAX. Again, seeing a lot more of that. I think LDF got top of the 32 of it as well. Did really, really well. Again, any thoughts just from you, Joe, or just the fact that it's just a really good gust option despite being such a big 3-prizer?
Yeah, I think this is just a bit of a sneaky deck that can surprise people and is quite flexible. Just having that little bit of Hawlucha, Belt, Single Strike Energy, and Alakazam all wrapped into one. You don't really know what your opponent's range is next turn, so you have to play quite weirdly against it. You have to expect that you could get hand disrupted. You have to expect that your board can get disrupted. You have to have answers for Duraludon on the spot if you're Lugia, and if you don't have the Urshifu in time, you can be in trouble. So still seems to be a powerful Pokemon. Lost City is really annoying for Lost Zone players. And just having that early Umbreon pressure,
and Gardevoir players as well.
Keep Guardi, it keeps Guardi very honest, especially if you're Lost Citying Curlies as you go. So just a difficult deck to play around. It basically just asks questions of the opponent, and if they don't respond appropriately in certain spots, they can get massively punished for that.
Definitely, and I think as well this format also benefits from we're seeing so many different supporters getting played. Lugia is now relying on Professor Burnett, which got no play before Scarlet and Violet, before rotation. Looking at this list here now, you got Adventures Discovery, never saw a place, and Volo. Beforehand, if with the meta decks, before Scarlet and Violet pre-rotation, you could say, well, there's going to be 4 Marnies, there's going to be 3 Bosses Orders, there's going to be 3 Professors Research, and there might be a Roxanne. Whereas now there's actually some flexibility. Obviously, Colress is such a good card, and the fact that it can go into any deck and it's the draw. The difficulty obviously in the Lost Zone, but it's just so good, and it gets its place in so many decks. But seeing things like Adventures Discovery on stream,
when you're playing so many V's,
I've not seen that the card any play at all. All of a sudden it's getting played, and the stuff like Volo as well getting really good play, and that's what I'm quite excited about this format. We're seeing not new cards, but older cards getting used, whereby we didn't even think they were prevalent at all. So it's really good, and it's interesting. But that's pretty much it for Hartford. Again, I think it was the infographic that the Pokemon's obviously put on the stream, and surprise, Lost Box was the most prominent deck of the weekend. I also think that Guardi usage had dropped down a bit, because I think in EUIC think Guardi was the clear favourite. I think it was over 220 people played Guardi. I think it was still over 200 in Hartford, but it wasn't, it had come down a little
Lost
bit.
Box came along,
Lost
basically.
Box and Lugia. I still think, Lugia actually increased as well. But then obviously, the Arc Giratina was a big deck that also saw a lot of play following the recent results as well. So in terms of North America, the meta's a bit different, obviously, to Europe. It's all very similar, but there's a lot more different plays out in America, and especially North America. What do you think is, obviously, NIIC is coming up shortly. I think that tickets were just on sale last week, I believe, which, again, not going to talk about people complaining about that. But what would your bet be for NAIC, and what would you think is going to win it?
If I had to say today, probably Gardevoir, just because of its upgrades that it gets from Paldea Evolved. It just seems to be super well-rounded. But ultimately, for a tournament like this, you just have to look at the contingents of players. We know that the Azul testing group love playing Lost Zone Box and have basically always found a way for that to do well, so you can't really write that off. Reagan and Isaiah and that testing group have played Lugia since it's been released and have continued to have insane results.
Yeah.
And then we've got other testing groups that are happy to come up with the Duraludon, Umbreon random combinations. So, and then make that a staple in the metagame. So it's hard to forecast everything right now. But Gardevoir would be my choice for probably the strongest deck going into the next set.
No, we didn't see many Miraidons, unfortunately. I like Miraidon. Not in day 2. I quite like Miraidon. I think it's there are
some in day 2. There's 4.
I think it's a mid deck, but I like how it pops off. But it's so reliant on so many things.
In Japan, when it came out, it was just steamrolling everything.
It was everywhere.
Yeah,
but it's obviously best of one over in Japan. I think that makes such a big difference.
It sets up quite
the start of best of one is great, but I think late end game it really struggles. But there's still people persevering with it, and I respect them, and I like that. And I always watch you on stream. So but yeah, moving then over to Europe. Malmo was obviously over the weekend as well, bit smaller scale, just short of 500 players, so 473 players, and it was won by another, we've already spoiled it, another Fusion Strike Mew by Lasse Pusuto. Obviously the final was a mirror match basically, but it was DTE versus Fusion Strike, and Fusion Strike came on up top really. So we'll have a quick look at the deck list to see if any varies.
Half the top 8 are Mew, and it's crazy.
I think we should blame Pablo for that. But yeah, looking here again, nothing's I don't think I can't see any trekking shoes. So
this one plays 2 Judge, which I think is the big difference. Rowan only played Roxanne, whereas this one plays less items and a couple Judge, I think.
Yeah.
Rowan only played one. He only just played one Path to the Peak. I don't think he played.
Yeah, that's true as well. The stadiums were different.
Yeah.
It's I just can't believe Fusion Strike Mew.
It's always going to be there until it rotates. It's always a threat. I don't know. Even maybe with Spiritomb, when Spiritomb comes out, maybe it's finally kicked.
Spiritomb gives us a reason to play Fusion Strike build as well, though, because you can put energies on your Genesects to unlock them.
Yeah. You'd still just play Drapion anyway. I'd rather play Drapion
Probably.
and be able to.
A lot of decks still will.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, definitely.
I play Mew and I play Drapion.
So. Exactly. But yeah, obviously, congratulations to Lasse as well. I think reading on Twitter, I think he didn't playtest at all going into it. I think he was the most laid back winner of a regional ever.
It seemed really sound.
He's so sound, yeah. I think one of his team were like, I can't believe he literally just didn't play test at all, just turned up and then just won it.
Someone said on Twitter he actually just scooped a game so he could go. He was hungry.
Go and eat.
To eat.
Yeah.
So he got some lunch.
The lines are pretty bad. To be fair. The lines are pretty bad. I remember from the UIC.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, not much really to talk about in terms of it's obviously, we've spoken about Mew Fusion Strike Mew. We've spoken about that. We obviously know the power of DTE Mew. Brennan obviously ran the Lost Zone box. I think he teched, if I remember correctly, did he tech anything in particular?
It's just turbo, I think.
Yeah, just standard turbo. Yeah, we're seeing a lot again. Yeah, a lot more of the pokey stuff and the treasure shoes come in. So yeah, fine, okay, yeah.
The Lone Guardian in the top 8 as well. I'm surprised that it got there. To be fair, who played it?
So it was Brian. We'll have a quick look at his deck list.
Like a big achievement to get through all those lost box.
I don't think in this format we'll see another Gardevoir win a tournament because it's too much dodging and weaving. And I probably would have played Guardi at this event knowing that I'm not going to win the event. But it's like a good deck to still make day 2.
Yeah.
It's too much to dodge. It's crazy.
It is massively so, yeah. Again, looking at the list, there's nothing that stands out. I think a lot of people now path to the peak. I think a lot of people are just moving over to Forest Steelstone over Sky Steelstone for the consistency. I've seen that quite a lot in a lot of lists. But apart from that, again, I know you said obviously path to the peak. Another stadium to bump, helps Guardi. So yeah, overall looks pretty good. We did mention at the start of the episode that unfortunately there was a little bit more controversy both in Hartford and Malmo. So we'll touch on Malmo first. We've obviously stated, we've spoken about these issues beforehand. We've spoken about numerous issues. There's obviously elements of cheating. There's all these elements we've spoken about before, and we try to remain impartial. We only go with what has been shown on screen and also what what people say. So there was an incident that occurred, I believe, was it day 2? I think it was day 2 of Malmo, where a British player, Oliver Barnett, got disqualified in his game for apparently prize manipulation. So there's a video going around, obviously looking at the highlights of the match, and it seems he needed a Clara, and in his prizes there was a Clara and a Colress's Experiment. Picked up the Colress. Well, I say picked up. He moved to get the Colress. Looks like he moved it a bit, and then decided to go for the Clara, and obviously went on and won the game. I think on reflection, the judges looked back at the stream and obviously discussed it. I think he was disqualified. There's been a lot of uproar about this in the community, given that there was also another cheating scandal. Was it last week? Was it in South? Was it in America? Was it South?
Was that a cup? Or...
Yeah, so where basically someone got, again, he got
in Bogota? He didn't. I think it was in Bogota.
Was it in Bogota? Yeah.
Yeah.
He didn't get disqualified, but it was recorded for YouTube, and he's been called out since for basically palming the Arceus V-Star and shuffling every card but the top card, and obviously being able to get
manipulating the opponent's deck as well.
I mean, why do it on stream? Like,
why? Well, they think they're gonna get. Obviously, they think they're gonna get away.
Yeah,
with
but
it.
you're on stream. But everyone could see.
Yeah, I mean, we're in a position whereby we've never been on stream. We go to regionals, we go to UIC, etc., and the pressure of just playing in such a large tournament. So I know the pressure on being on stream, on the headphones. I believe, Joe, they play white noise through the headphones.
It's music in Europe now. I don't know about US streams.
Yeah. So again, having that whilst also the pressure of thousands and thousands and thousands of people watching you online, and also you're in front of the stage with the spectators, it is difficult. People probably do make mistakes. People do make mistakes. And that separates, obviously.
I put 8 prizes down once, and that was a mistake. and I took one, and it was like, why have you got 7 prizes?
You also
the judge came over.
I can put it in your hand.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I made a lot of mistakes.
So yeah, we obviously all make mistakes. We're not judging anyone on that, but I do know that Oliver has put a statement out stating that he believes he didn't cheat, but he does. I think it's a long-winded statement. But the outcome is basically, I think he's stepping away from the community at the moment, and obviously we'll wait and see. We met Oliver at our local league challenge, and he won that, and we were ill after, so I don't know if that's an omen, but but yeah, we'll obviously we'll you know, it's you're able to look at it yourself and make your own judgments. But again, the only thing we will ask is if you do, obviously you've got to respect each and every one. You know, everyone's human, people make mistakes, etc. We don't condone it, but we are seeing a lot more of it, unfortunately, coming into Pokemon TCG. There's a lot more happening and occurring. I mean, we haven't been in the community that long, but we've seen every week we seem to have some new controversy to talk about. Has it been that way for years, or is it more since it's exploded almost?
I think it's become a lot more common, a lot more high profile, a lot more of a talking point, which is a good thing, but it's way too frequent right now. I don't know what's happened over since COVID, if there's been a mental shift or anything else, but it seems to be way more frequent than I've seen, and it's really upsetting to see, to be honest with you.
100%, yeah.
But I think in this case, disqualification was the only correct outcome for Oliver, regardless of intent.
Yeah.
So I think judges has done the best they can in that situation, and
No, definitely.
it's obviously been brought to light, which is also a great thing.
Yeah, definitely. And again, Oliver hasn't shirked away from it, to be fair to him. You know, he could have just, deactivated his Twitter and just ignored people, gone off social media, because people's, shout a lot on social media. We're all aware of that. He came out with a statement, people can make their own judgments, and then I think he is taking a step back now, because I think he's disappointed himself more than anyone as well, and I think he says that in the statement. So yeah, obviously wish all the best to Oliver, and we'll, like you said, it's just becoming every week, the people put memes out saying, of the community meme of Donald Glover coming in with the pizza and the pot on fire. That's every weekend after a regional. There's always something, moving over.
As it grows, as the community grows and as the tournaments grow, the more people there are, the more people.
The more it's in the spotlight, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
But do you think Pokemon need to take not a harsher stance, but a stance at all? Because I think, from my opinion, they've been quite standoffish of a lot of this. We had the issue we spoke about months ago where a judge didn't get on with a player and basically got them kicked off and it was actually on stream, I think it was at the time as well. And we hear all these things later, but Pokemon just comes out with, and I'm not, I'm very unfair on Pokemon, but it's a very generic statement, equality, and everyone's, we don't want anyone to feel hurt. Just, we want everyone to feel welcomed, but they need to maybe nail down on it a bit more and be a bit more proactive.
Yeah.
Because the cheaters are getting away with it, and while they call them, the community calls them out, and they get a bad reputation, they're marked. They're still able to go and attend to all these tournaments, and it's just the community that's in the uproar.
Yeah, it's a shame that it's having to be community led, and there's not enough transparency from Pokemon. I think everyone wants that.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, the judges aren't allowed to talk about this stuff either, so they can be shown in a bad light and can't defend themselves, or they seem like they are hiding behind a curtain or whatever, but they're just not allowed to, even if they want to discuss this sort of stuff. And it's a shame, because things could get solved more easily, things could be understood more easily, and we could see different perspectives. But to me, it feels like there's a lot of situations that could have been handled differently, and the community is trying to sort of find their own justice, which is a strange thing to go about.
It is bizarre,
isn't
it?
A lot of it's not fully informed, right?
Yeah, it's definitely the wrong way. Yeah, and it becomes almost a witch hunt. Then that's the problem. It's also good that you mentioned that, Joe, about a different perspective. We one of our friends is actually a judge. He plays at our local, and he's a judge, and he's going to come on and speak to us, because it's good to get his perspective of what they can say, what they can't say, what the processes, etc. Because we just see what we see on stream. We make our own minds up. We're also very heavily influenced by social media. That's just unfortunately the state of play of the world at the moment. That's not just for Pokemon, that's for everything.
It's like golf sports. It's like when a referee makes a bad decision, they become public enemy number one, and not even a bad decision, just a decision against what you want. So
do you reckon what a VAR in Pokemon?
Yeah, do with some VAR.
We laughed actually. We before Liverpool, Joe, we went and tested in our local geek retreat, and the night we tested was a Yu-Gi-Oh tournament upstairs, and no word of a lie, when we were playing and practicing, one of the Yu-Gi-Oh players came downstairs and who would have like asked the guy behind the counter to get the CCTV out and rewind it because he wanted to see if his opponent took an extra card. I thought, wow, like replay VAR.
Demanded
Unbelievable.
like CCTV footage.
Yeah, we're not that bad, but yeah, again, agree with you, Joe. And there just needs to be more. There just needs to be more transparency, 100%.
Yeah.
So, moving over to Hartford, unfortunately, there was 2 instances. One in relation to someone taking photos of a trans player, which was again, violating their personal space. They're violating their rights, etc. Again, the community came together again for that. I don't know the outcome, but again, I just hope that the player is happy, safe, and that's all we want. You want to go to Pokemon, you want to enjoy yourself and have a safe space. 100%. And then the actual winner of Hartford, Rowan, again, should be really relishing this moment. He's won a regional, etc. But unfortunately, it came out on social media again, that beforehand, before the tournament, his friend had shaved a swastika into his head, and then obviously, he shaved all his hair off. But that came up to light following his win, which obviously tarnished the win really, and it made Rowan have to come out and defend himself. He did again put a statement out, and to be honest, I think we all discussed it. I think it's legitimate. I think it was a legitimate mistake. If you actually watch the video, he actually says, "What did you put into my side? Can you take a picture?" Because he actually couldn't see because it was the side of his head over here. It's just
don't put it.
Just don't. Social media. I know we use it as a.
I don't even think he put it on Snapchat.
Well, no,
He didn't put it on.
It was his brother. I think it was his brother, unfortunately. But again, you work so hard.
I'm just glad that we grew up before.
Yeah.
We had MySpace. That's
Yeah.
Showing our age again. All we wanted was for likes and comments on pictures. That's all we wanted. But again, yeah, considering social media is such a powerful tool, and a tool that can be used for so good. Like obviously, Joe, you're here today because of social media. Your job and your role within the community has expanded massively because of social media. It is a tool for good, but it just seems to be getting so many people into trouble.
Well, it's not social media's fault that people are idiots.
Yeah,
it's just more prominent, isn't it? So again, we just thought we'd advise what had gone on, and also advise that just don't be
sensible kids.
Be sensible kids. I feel really old now. Okay, well, I think we've covered obviously the 2 regionals. We've questioned Joe to death, but the last question I'm going to ask Joe is, we have a segment of our podcast called RTFC, which is read the flipping card, and
although we don't say flipping.
We don't say flipping, but we try to be a family-friendly podcast. Family-friendly podcast.
Read the family-friendly card.
Good one, yeah. So do you have a card that has taken you a bit by surprise as of late, or a card that you had to pick up and go, actually, wait, what does it do? Have you got one?
Yeah, I absolutely have. The latest League Cup that I went to, I had to pick this up. A Mew player was using this tool card against me. It's a Box of Disaster, which says if the Pokemon V this card is attached to has full hit points and is knocked out by damage from an attack from your opponent's Pokemon, put 8 counters on the attacking Pokemon. And this is a specific tech inclusion for Mew players against Gardevoir players, because of course you're damaging yourself so much to reach the 1-hit KO onto Mew players, and you don't play any tool removal in Gardevoir typically. So it was a great way for Paul, who we all know here, to get almost like a revenge knockout, or just sort of lower the amount of turns I had to construct my prize map. Because typically I was playing Sky Stone, so typically your prize map would be to try and avoid Roxanne. You would try and knock out a Genesect first, then take a 4-prize knockout on Mew to sort of close out the game, which gives you a lot of time to just use a ton of Mew, use a ton of refinements, and slowly build up your board to that sort of state. knowing that, of course, you're still getting hit with Judge and Path, so you're still having to find multiple things all in one go from still low hand sizes, just not quite as bad as Roxanne. And in this case, I had to attack into the Box of Disaster because I'd run out of turns to find my combination. So I had to use my attack with Zacian to take 4 prizes, in doing so giving Paul his last prize, to bring us to a sudden death situation in Top Cut for game 1. Which means we both had to shuffle up. We both had to reflip a coin to see who would go first. And then it would be first prize wins. We would both set out 6 prize cards still, but then first prize wins. I won the coin flip, so I was actually really happy with that outcome because game 1 had gone so poorly for me. And it took me so long to sort of accumulate this combination that I was really happy to have won the coin flip.
Yeah,
I get a really good turn 1 setup, but it's still really difficult for me to take the first prizes, even going first as Gardevoir, because it still needs a lot of things to go right for you.
So much setup, yeah.
So I tried to get like my Roar of the Sword, my Zacian going, as well as like all my other basics. Paul was able to go Judge Path, and although I was able to hit the Candy combo, I wasn't able to bounce Stadium, so he ended up winning that game 1, and that was all down to Box of Disaster. I managed to beat it in Swiss earlier, but it makes life much more difficult and completely changes that prize map with a 1-card tech inclusion. So very cool card that I had to read and terrified me actually.
I've come up against the Box of. I've come up against a player who's playing that, and I was like, oh, because I'd never come up against it before, and I had my Gardevoir Shining Arcana out, ready to take out this hit on this little 1 prize Pokemon. I was like, oh, I have to damage him first a little bit, and then I was like, oh look, what do I do? How do I? And I was like, I just played on.
I definitely was thinking about trying to weave in a poke with Ralts and Mew at different points in the game, but it never came to fruition.
Yeah,
I think I did like a memory skip or something on him, and something like that.
It's quite interesting. You see these more tech cards now. I think the one I keep coming across at the moment is Cleansing Gloves. Again, it's just choice belt for Guardi, isn't it?
Yeah, literally.
Guardian Mew, isn't it? Well. Yeah, it's definitely interesting.
Guardi will start playing cleansing gloves
just for the mirror. Exactly. No, brilliant. Well, thank you very much, Joe, for joining us this week. We really, really appreciate it. We obviously probably questioned you to death, so we will let you go. So thank you very, very much. For our listeners and viewers out there, where's the best place to catch up with you?
Thanks for having me on. I really enjoyed it. It was a great chat and some great questions throughout. My YouTube channel is OmniPoke. My Twitter is Omni_Joe. My Twitch, which I'm very sporadic on, but typically when a new set's released, I'll be on there. It's Team OmniPoke. So that's all the places to find me.
Brilliant. Thank you very much again for joining us. So again, I want to thank Alex, Andy and Kath as well for joining me again this week, and you guys for listening and watching. So the best place to catch us on our social media, despite us saying it's not great, is our Twitter. So you can follow us on our Twitter for family-friendly fun. It's at Training Court. We also have an Instagram page, which is at Training Court TCG. To listen to us or to watch us, we release every Friday on YouTube. So we're at Training Court TCG, or you can catch us on Spotify or Apple iTunes. Again, just Training Court TCG. I want to thank you all again for joining us, and we'll catch you all next week. Take care.
Thank you. Bye bye.